Hi, everyone. This is Michelle Konetsky, and today I'm joined by Greg Fitzgerald, co-founder and CXO of Sevco Security. Thank you for joining, and whether you're joining live or watching a replay, or even catching the podcast version. As a reminder, we are recording the show, and we go live every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central, on LinkedIn Live, YouTube, and Facebook. For those of you catching the replay or listening to the podcast, we're available and will be broadcasting to the platform of your choice. And finally, for our live viewers, I encourage you to engage, provide your insights, ask questions, make this a little bit more of a dialogue. Join Greg and I in on the conversation where and how you would like. Now, for the good part. This series is called Product Growth, and today's episode is Designing Technology with the Customer in Mind. We're going to be talking about how technology, as we all know, is something that can improve our daily lives, is something that, when purpose built, can actually solve some really cool problems, especially for customers, both in an efficient and effective manner. But what happens when technology is just built for the sake of technology? Well, join us as in this discussion as Greg and I talk about customer-driven technology. All right. So now, Greg, thank you so much for joining today. As we get started, will you give a quick little intro about yourself, what you've done previously, what you're doing now?
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, it's great to be a part of your program. It's an honor. I want to, say hi to the audience. I've been around in the cybersecurity space and software in particular for the past 27 years. I've been very blessed in my career to grow from companies such as Compaq back in creating the internet in 96, literally with Intel servers versus Linux-based servers and Sun servers. Got into BMC software and helped manage the infrastructure. Got into cybersecurity with Tipping Point as one of the first intrusion prevention systems. Same thing with SourceFire as it expanded into the cloud and became more of a next-gen firewall as well as an intrusion prevention system. Was chief marketing officer of Fortinet for a number of years, and then was very fortunate to join the founders of Cylance and helped recreate the endpoint antivirus space using artificial intelligence back when that was literally a theory, not really a huge commercial application. And since then, I've been an entrepreneur in many of the other ventures of startups and helping them grow relative to your topic today, which is having a product that has a product market fit and was designed for the customer in mind and solving problems, not just technology for technology's sake. And now I'm the co-founder of a company called Sevco Security right here in Austin. We're now, thanks to COVID, a 100% virtual company, but still use Austin, Texas as our headquarters.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining me virtually, even though you live just down the street. All right. So product marketing, we have to talk about narratives and how are you differentiating yourself. And one of the most fundamental products I like to think is ourselves, you. And to kind of kick this off, I like to start with a little bit of a personal narrative. What are your differentiators? What is your personal narrative and what makes you successful in what you've been doing as of late?
That's a great question. If I summarize what I am best at for Greg Fitzgerald is I'm two things. I'm a translator, whereby I've been able to understand what customers, especially the enterprise-based customers, what their needs and wants, because they're two different things, are, and translate that back to people that design products for a living, engineers and product designers, whether hardware or software. And then vice versa, take what they've designed and be able to translate out the benefits, the true value of features and the functions of what they've produced. So I've been a great translator. And because of that, also become more of a change agent. So in most of what I've been able to do with startups and growth is help identify how to have people change their mindsets about certain solutions they have today. And so I've been able to specialize in those two things that make Greg Fitzgerald unique. And then I do it with a bit of, casualness, authenticity, and a flair that is fun and engaging and usually seems to work pretty well in the market.
Yeah, thank you. Well, and actually, I really feel like that is one of the fundamental needs in product marketing even, but especially as you as CXO and co-founder, of translating, being in between the technologists, the product teams, and marketing and customers, being that translator. I like to say that they're almost they speak two different languages. And it's so critical to have somebody that can understand the technology in such a way that you can simplify it and turn it into a differentiated narrative that helps set companies apart.
I agree. And as a matter of fact, my title, as you said, is like Chief Experience Officer. Technically, if you ask that, it's president of Sevco Security, but the experience that the user and eventually, hopefully, the buyer, in essence, of this has to have a positive experience with the entire organization, right? So it can be a widget, but that experience has to start with how they even think about it and learn about it. And of course, the branding and the feeling that they get from the customer and the representative that's kind of presenting it to them, as well as the use and the follow-up of that. So they continue to use the product, like in renewals and otherwise, or upgrades. And then hopefully they become the evangelist and word of mouth that helps propagate the success of that. Hence both change into people's mindsets that, wow, this person sees a value here, and the vice versa, where we get the feedback on what's working, what's not working relative to that individual or that organization, and then feed that back into the product, hence translate back and forth constantly to make sure that you're staying ahead of the game.
Yeah, and really thinking of the customer throughout the entire life cycle. We have a customer maturity life cycle that we use with our clients, and really thinking about the customer experience through all of that is so important. Talk to me. You recently won an award, the RSA Innovation Sandbox Award. Talk to me about the genesis of that, why you think you won.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to win that. The reason being is that it's been has a set of judges that are independent and not associated with any particular organization or function, that literally has to look at 800 plus technology organizations, most of them startups, but not all, that are changing things, right? Changing the way people are interacting with technology or their business processes. And you have to do a video for it. You have to have a long application, and then the judges actually vet all of that. So out of, let's say, 1,000, they choose 10, and only 10 that represent for the largest cybersecurity conference, in the world today is RSA, and that particular one, highlights, hey, these are the top 10 you need to look at. So it's beautiful because we're within a mix of really interesting other organizations. And in particular, what I think is interesting is that it's recognized that we are solving a problem versus being selected as technology for technology's sake. And there's a lot of that in this market, right? There's 4,000, depending on who you ask, cybersecurity startups in the market today. And a lot of them are doing the exact same thing. But a lot of stuff is just, hey, this is a widget. This is cool. This is different. Great. But that's technology for technology's sake, or a capability that doesn't necessarily solve a solid problem. And so with our company, Sevco is all about visibility and identifying the risk and security gaps that an organization has about the devices, the users, and the applications that are interacting in their network. A step further, it's just giving the IT and security people the true fundamental understanding of a database that they can use, a single source of truth that says this is the exact number of devices, the exact number of users, this is the exact number of applications, and then most importantly, the telemetry of who's using what, with what, from where, and at what time. And with that information, lots of better decisions can be made relative to IT security postures, licensing, risk management across the organization, policies and procedures, compliance and audit, lots of use cases that come out of that. But that's what we provide. And so winning this award shows, hopefully, a lot of people that the fundamentals of understanding just who you are as an organization and what you're using and who's using it is vital. That's the fundamental premise of being able to make better decisions. So I love it. It's not sexy. This is not a sexy job or a sexy area that we're in. It is a requirement that's solving a serious problem.
Yeah. Well, what I love about the award is that Well, one, it's not one of those you pay to play or you pay to earn kind of thing. And it truly is an award, one for the sake of the value that you are bringing with your technology and meeting customer needs. Um, but two, it's really in order to improve security, there's the act of actually improving and defending, but giving insight and visibility across the internal ecosystem is so huge. And so congrats to you guys for winning the award.
Thank you very much. We're honored.
Look forward to hear more about the greatness that you guys are doing. So just kind of following that angle just a little bit, tell me what is really differentiating you from your competitors. How are you approaching this problem differently?
Great question. So I'll start with the premise that, there's NIST, there's all these frameworks for IT and cybersecurity, whether it's NIST, ISO, CIS controls, that are all saying you need to understand what your assets are and what your software is before you can move down the path of really compliance with those frameworks.
Mm-hmm.
However, to date, most organizations have jumped over the first two and they're doing number 8, 10, 12, 20. And they're doing it where it's just kind of, they know what they know. So the key for us is threefold. One is we're given visibility to everything they already have, but most importantly, by using the tools and the systems they already have. Meaning we don't have an agent and we don't have a scanner. Our fundamental belief is you don't need more. What you need to do is optimize what you've got. And what you've got relative, whether it's an Active Directory, which is the critical heart of an organization and what accesses it, or your endpoint security, which is obviously got purpose-built entity of protecting that endpoint, or your network monitor, or your scanner. I mean, all of them were built for purpose. The challenge is they don't talk to each other. And if they try to talk a little bit, there's no effective correlation or deduplication or normalization or visualization or even the exporting of that on a consistent basis and on a continuous basis. So that's kind of the first thing. The second one is telemetry. Like I mentioned at the beginning, I need to know who has what, using what, with what on it, from where. And that changes all the time, right? The uniqueness is not a snapshot in time, which is any technology today in the market that exists from competitors, or whether they're doing it manually or whether it's homegrown. All of those are snapshots in time.
Right.
I always challenge the folks is that when you're looking at this and making these decisions, you don't want to say, oh yeah, I check on it on Monday. Well, it's
security doesn't wait for Monday to happen.
Right. It's got to happen all the time and at the point of a button. So that's one of the critical elements of the telemetry of understanding what's at. And that kind of combines into that last one, which is around the continuousness of being able to do this all the time without an agent, without a scanner, but being to pull, in essence, the data, the right data. Let me be very specific. We're not looking at logs and events, but looking at true, hard, factual attributes of what a device is and who the user is and what application is. And with that, there aren't any false positives because it is what it is, right? And that when combined, then it shows, oh, there's a gap here that, I didn't know that certain people are accessing the network without the proper security stack on it. Or maybe it's not updated with the patches, or maybe it doesn't even have a patch system on it, and that's a big problem. Or maybe our network servers are exposed in certain ways. There's a plethora of exposures that come out of this, but having the proper real-time continuous, database is really what it is. And so problem, going back to what we saw, that's technology for technology's sake. The technology, a problem is that people don't have visibility. And we identified that as the key area. And then the question was, going back to what we try to do, is build a solution. And I say a solution because it could have been a combination of different products, but we to create one that solves that problem. And that's kind of why it's funny is people go, oh, is it AI based and machine learning and using the latest, greatest and all these things? A little bit. We use a little bit, but that's not the core of the value. Whether we're using AI, machine learning, or quantum physics, or whatever, doesn't matter, right? It's that we solve this problem most effectively and efficiently and it fits buyer perfectly, right? The product market fit is just ideal. And because of that, Sevco's been around for 2.5 years, and we are skyrocketing in our growth, both not only in revenue, but in customer use of the product. So we measure a lot of metrics where we're actually, a lot of people sell product and they, oh, we're doing great. Yeah, it's shelfware. Dude, they never use it. Or they're only
Are they actually using it?
Yeah, we measure all the use, and people are in terms of time that they spend on it and the engagement of the value they're getting out of it. We have metrics that measure that, and we can see the growth in that particular element, which is wonderful because it creates a stickiness on the sales side, but more importantly, a value that is being appreciated on the other side.
Yeah. So out of curiosity, what amount of users are you actually see using it?
Oh, 100%. I mean, of the
Oh,
users,
so
yeah, everybody that we've got is not just buying it with, like I said, shelfware, but at the
they're
same time,
actually
what I mean
using it.
by it's not just one person either. So sometimes, for example, we typically will sell to a chief information security officer. He or she will often work with the IT, the CIO in that area, or the chief architects. What's fascinating is you go, okay, they're working collaboratively because they both need this information. And you might presume that only one or a team of one might be the user of the product. What we're finding is that those that are using it are expanding across departments at an organization, to where we might find a project manager in the help desk area, or an accounting person in the finance area that's also accessing the exact same dashboard and information as our IT and security experts are. And that's what I find most fascinating, is that the product value and fit is expanding beyond just a single target audience, but to other users.
Well, and that's when you really start generating scalable long-term growth, really. And what I love about what you were just talking about is that you're actually augmenting and working with existing solutions, when we know that any environment, especially an enterprise level environment, tends to have 40, 60, 70 different security solutions in place. What they don't need is another security solution to try to like hit whack-a-mole security. It's really come in and solve problems. And I think the way that you guys have innovated and really trying to do this is exciting. And I love to see the opportunity that you're creating here. So let's talk for a few minutes about technology for the sake of technology, and why not, and why you guys are not that. So when and how did you realize that you had the right product customer market fit?
Yeah, great question, because we've got 27 years and you got scars on your back for doing it the wrong way. Started out where, you got an engineer, it's like, this is awesome. And you just go create it and you kind of just follow along the path. And there's a bunch of evangelical elements associated to convincing someone that something brand new, they don't know anything about, is right for them. That's one key where technology for technology's sake can be applicable. But that was back in the day when technology was, I'm gray hair, it's starting to show the age, right? Where technology wasn't had the plethora of access we have today, right? Like an iPad, for example, was literally just born in 2010. It's hard to believe that. Like, we're only 12 years in, and it seems like they're everywhere. Everybody's got them, right? So the commercialization of this IT in general has expanded that kind of just the use of technology, which leads to technology for technology's sake. Before we even started Sevco, we interviewed 60 practitioners across all industries, of retail to financial to manufacturing, and we were just asking them, what are they challenged with, and what are their major problems? And that started to unfold a consistent message around this understanding of their organization, meaning you cannot protect what you do not know,
Right.
or you're not aware of. And so we had to dive into that layer upon layer of, what does that mean? What are you doing today to manage this? How is that unfolding? How's it working for you, right? To even see if there's an opportunity, and then understand if the market was big enough for us to create a solution that might have viability, because we are venture backed. We're not a homegrown,
Not bootstrapped, grown. Yeah.
and there's lots of companies that could do that and have a financial exit if desired. really good for the individual or a smaller group of people. But because we're venture backed, obviously the aspiration is much larger, and the market change dynamic is needed. So we spent time there, and then we started to get prospective advisors who were able to guide us relative to what that meant. Hence my translation elements of getting the right people with the right knowledge
Mhm.
base to talk to our engineering group. And again, we didn't even have an engineering group. It was a bunch of guys who were working elsewhere, right? But we had identified them, and they were like, "Yeah, I like this idea, and I'd love to start a company, but I'm not leaving my company until like I'm ready. I understand what's going to be built." And so
Yeah,
we were
fair
able to
enough.
have these practitioner series elements and just talk. And then all of a sudden they're like, "I got it. I think what we need to do." Right. And so then we had architects and people that were wicked smart, engineering, who were like, "I see what this kind of looks like. I've built pieces of it before. And if we do this, this, and the other, this might have a solid foundation." And that's how we started to solve
Mhm.
the problem and then build a solution on top of it.
Yeah. Well, and what I love about that is that the customer was absolutely front and center and core to the design. So there was no bring the technology, now let's go find where we can sell it and to whom we can sell it to. Like,
Yes.
okay, that we're solving a need and a pain point. Now
Yep.
let's figure out the technology for that.
Yeah, and then we've had to fine tune it, right? We first got one, it's a true process. It was funny in May of 2020, in the middle of COVID. We had these 11 engineers and just cranking on a product and an alpha product. Okay, so based on that information, they said, "I think this is what it could look like." Everybody kind of scratched it together over about 30 days, and they popped it out and they said, "Let's just go to one of those, advisors who said, I'm willing to work, work on this and play with it a little bit, see what happens." And with that, it validated a lot of elements that were taken in, and then it, uh, kind of devalued or changed the perspective on other elements. And then they said, okay, they kind of put it away, and then they went and rebuilt this product from scratch again into what has now become like the foundation of the product. So it was,
Mhm.
and then it's been an iterative process. We do follow that whole Scrum kind of a modeling
Yep,
where we're changing things all the time and
constantly.
increasing it based on the feedback, the usage statistics of what's happening with our customers.
Yeah, and that's why the like a traditional waterfall model just while it could be nice to just set it and go, but then by the time you get to the end, you might realize, look back and go, well, wait a minute. Engineers should have some feedback and customers have feedback throughout. So the agile kind of scrum iterative process is the right way. So have you found in all of your 27 gray hair years of experience, you say, I have some too, I just hide them. um, are there any telltale signs of when companies actually develop technology for the sake of technology?
A couple things. True. One is if they don't have, um, like in the early stages, if they don't have like engineering um, and customers like talking together. So if you kind of look behind the scenes, if they're not talking together, then they're missing it. If it's just engineers and there's not a sales group and stuff that is knowledgeable about that product intimately, when I say knowledgeable, I mean like how it works and the feature
Yeah.
functions, like detailed. That's a telltale sign because you just got a sales guys trying to pitch something. Not good because they're just pitching a product. They don't know it. And
Hmm.
usually because it's been engineering developed and led, and they're just looking for the horses to go pitch it. But if you got a true organizational culture that believes in customer first engineering, then you will find that a lot of times the engineer is the sales guy, right? Or the
Yeah.
engineer is right there. And that those people on the front end are very knowledgeable about the product. They can demo it themselves. They can dive into the details, and you don't need a security engineer to back them up to a certain level, right? They're different people. So that's one telltale sign. Another one you see often is when they're pitching like a whole plethora of features, right, and hoping they stick. And I think that's one of the biggest problems is they're saying it can do all these things, and I'm hoping one of them attracts you. That's a telltale sign of in like just a technology for technology's sake. Or if you have to explain like how it works, um, to create that value, that's another technology for technology's sake telltale sign. versus someone just coming out with a benefit. Like I said, I didn't tell you anything about what we do other than we provide value and we don't use an agent or a scanner.
Yeah.
That's customer led, right? Because you're like, I need that benefit, right?
That makes me want to know more quickly and ask
right?
questions.
And I might want to know, like, if in the end, I mean, I need to know how it works. Maybe I want to know some of the secret sauce. Awesome. More than happy to tell you. But that's not what I want to sell you. I want to sell you on what we're fixing. And I think that's part of that. You can find that as a telltale sign.
Yeah. And oftentimes I find let's overtalk the customer, or and it's not being able to synthesize it down into something very, very clear that matches customer needs. So it's just too much overload that really points to technology focus. And technology is good. Like you mentioned, AI, ML, those were like the darlings of technology and security for quite some time. Yeah. But in reality, how are they being used to solve customer pain points? And they can be used in very different ways, ultimately.
Very much so.
Yep. So I want to talk a moment, as you being co-founder, what are some of your best tips that startups can use, or startups, high growth companies can use, that really help drive a tighter customer product relationship? Because to me, that is where the magic happens. It is not over indexing into product. It's not over indexing into marketing and messaging, but really driving that tight alignment.
Yes. I mean, first is, getting your engineering team to be own the product, not I'm a back end coder, I'm a front end coder, I'm a UI guy, but actually really understand that they're building a something that needs to have value in the end, right? The product. So it's a mindset, is my point. The culture of the organization and the mindset of the engineering team. The second one is helping them have the first line exposure. Like, again, while I'm a translator, it was by necessity and not necessarily the way things were built 25 years ago, right? And I see a lot of successes today, especially in these web-based type solutions, right? Especially consumerization of elements of solutions, because they're just interacting with the customer all the time. And that's that, you're getting somebody out of the middle. And as much as you can bring engineering into every conversation, even if it doesn't seem like it's worth their time or effort, just hearing the context around, a buyer's needs or objections or what they're doing gives them exposure to what we sales marketing side hear all the time, right? So that's another really key thing. And as we get into what they're building, I always push back on this list of value or feature sets and be like, give me one. I need only one. Like, I can't sell 5, 10 of these things in terms of the values, because the customer, I'm going to lose them. I need the one thing that will give me the hook that then earns the right for me to continue to talk, right, about what else we can do and build the case in the conversation. And they go, oh man, you aren't just hung up on this one thing. You guys have a whole value proposition. And yes, but I can only start with that one. So that's one thing that helps a company at a small stage. Try not to boil the ocean, try to do too much, really focus on that one value, even if it doesn't have a whole lot more. If that one value is enough, people will buy it. Early adopters, you got to identify who your buyer is, but the early adopters and innovators will be like, dude, I like it. I like where you're going. Right. I can pull you along with me, or I can grow with you, and everybody's good.
Yeah, it's that focus, but then also I loved what you're talking about. It's that really creating a closed loop process of what customers need and want. And one thing that I have seen work really well is when organizations actually encourage, I hate to say mandate, but sometimes mandate, that engineers, other organizations actually go and listen to customer calls so that they do get that context. Because again, even though we are translators and connecting the dots between technology and customers, you can only scale so much. But using technology, Gong, for instance, is a really good application and program to use to record customer calls, and then just have people throughout the organization listen, and you can look for keywords, and that I have found that to be really important and help drive that focus and voice of the customer throughout the organization. Yep. And then I think we also touched base on a little bit around messaging and clarity and simplifying it, and how important that is for companies. Do that one thing really, really well. Before we really start wrapping up, I want to shift and talk a little bit about, again, just as CXO now, co-founder, previously a CMO, how do you feel about strategy versus tactical? Do you feel like startups and high growth companies tend to over-index in one side or the other? And if so, where do you think is the magic, the sweet spot, if you will, for them?
That's a good question. I do think startups tend to over-index on both, actually, on both strategy, on tactics. Typically, strategy being, what's the business plan? Like, who am I going after? What's the market segment? Usually driven because they need to get funding, but often don't get off of that, and just start doing. So I do believe strategy is great for setting things up, but as everybody knows, execution eats strategy for breakfast all the time, just like culture does. You need a great team of culture-driven organization that's got a mindset around being product or customer-driven, products. And then the second one is just start doing, put one foot in front of the other. Now, often when they do that, then they kind of fall in love with what they built. And they think this is great, and don't look up and look around to go, oh my gosh, either, I've totally missed the mark, or, are questioning why people aren't buying, because then they haven't been in touch with the customer all the time. Because if they listen or they interact, the customer's going to tell them point blank, either by not spending money, they don't have to do it verbally, they can do it by no action, or it can be obviously around the fact that someone literally speaks up and goes,
yeah, it's definitely not a set it and forget it kind of thing. You do have to come back and reevaluate and analyze it sometimes, and just make sure that you're on the right path.
Yes, I do. I think so. If you figure when your startup comes out, obviously, I think the first part is that discovery and that strategy and seeing who the players in the market are, and are there, like products around, and how are they going to differentiate over time? They don't even differentiate at the beginning, to be honest with you, right? Because you don't have those resources to come out of the chute, usually with something that's like dramatically different. You need enough, because the customer doesn't want to take that jump. It's always been, how do I make that step to make a simple step, not a broad jump. Yeah. And so to me, that's where it is. And then, like I said, get that off the ground, and then kind of put it on the shelf a little bit, and then just go do. But then in about 3-6 months, look up again, right? If you got to do and just execute to get that piece out, then when you do, step back before you jump back in and go. And it's a balance, because you're like, well, time is of the essence. Quality is important, but maybe, you're just trying to try it out. And so therefore, giving a repeatable process, whether it's advisory boards, you can get formal with it, advisory boards and QBR sessions and things like that. Those are very important, so that you blend that strategy and the tactics together.
Yeah. And then just being able to keep that customer in the center and that closed loop process. Yeah. Well, this has been a really great conversation, Greg. And I think just to kind of highlight a few things that we've really talked about, of things that kind of advice for especially high growth and startup companies, but really any company in general, to avoid the technology for technology's sake kind of thing. It's, number one, get focused and stay focused. Pick one thing, not 15. Pull the customer in, evaluate. What do they need? What do they want from the beginning? But don't just stop there. You have to, number 3, continuously reevaluate. Agile style, innovate, look, reevaluate, course correct. Don't just go and then realize that you've ended up in the wrong direction. But then 4, balance that with just do, execute. So it truly is that bring the customer into the center, but balance strategy with execution and constant iteration and learning and movement.
Well, I agree with. I think that's fantastic.
Well, Greg, I appreciate you being on the call here. Any final words of thoughts before we hop off?
Just last pieces of just, find those customers, love them and hold them close, and let them evangelize for you, and everything will work out as it should.
Yeah. Great. Well, thank you so much. Again, everyone, thank you for joining Product Growth here with Greg Fitzgerald. And as a reminder, we go live every week, 3 p.m. Eastern, 2 p.m. Central. And you can find us on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, as well as we'll be broadcasting to your podcast platform of choice. Thank you again. Thanks, Greg.